The night was quiet over the small farming valley where Ethan lived alone. His wooden cabin stood at the edge of a deep forest, far away from busy cities and crowded roads. Every evening after finishing his work, Ethan liked to repair old machines and farming drones. He enjoyed peaceful nights because nothing unusual had ever happened there. The stars filled the sky, and a cool wind moved gently through the tall trees. Ethan was fixing the broken wing of an old drone when the peaceful silence suddenly disappeared. A loud explosion shook the entire valley like thunder. The ground trembled beneath his feet, and several birds flew into the dark sky in panic. Ethan quickly looked toward the mountains. A bright blue light raced across the sky before crashing somewhere deep inside the forest. For a few seconds, the whole night glowed with strange blue fire before everything became dark again. Most people would have stayed inside their homes, but Ethan was different. His curious mind never allowed him to ignore a mystery. He grabbed his flashlight, a first aid bag, and a small hunting knife before climbing into his old off-road truck. As he drove toward the forest, he kept wondering what had fallen from the sky. At first, he believed it was only a meteor, but something inside him whispered that tonight was going to change his life forever. The deeper Ethan drove into the forest, the stranger everything became. His truck's radio suddenly filled with loud static before turning completely silent. His compass started spinning in circles without stopping. Even the insects had stopped making noise. The forest, usually full of life at night, now felt empty and cold. Ethan slowed the truck and looked carefully through the windshield, feeling as though invisible eyes were watching every move he made. After several minutes, he finally reached the crash site. Tall trees had been knocked down like small sticks, and smoke rose from a large crater in the ground. Pieces of shiny silver metal were scattered everywhere. They did not look like anything made on Earth. Some pieces still glowed with soft blue light, while others slowly melted into sparkling dust. Ethan carefully stepped closer, unable to believe what he was seeing. Near the center of the crater, he found a strange escape pod. It was cracked open and thick white smoke drifted into the cool night air. Strange symbols covered its smooth metal surface, glowing faintly before disappearing one by one. Ethan slowly approached the pod, expecting to find no survivors. Instead, he heard a quiet sound. Someone inside was crying. He carefully looked through the broken opening. Curled up inside was a young alien girl with long silver hair and glowing blue eyes. Her pale skin shimmered softly beneath the moonlight. She looked frightened, exhausted, and badly injured. A deep cut on her shoulder stained her light-colored clothing with purple blood. The moment she saw Ethan, fear filled her face, and she quickly tried to move away despite her injuries. Ethan raised both hands to show he meant no harm. He spoke softly, trying not to frighten her any more than she already was. Although they came from completely different worlds, kindness needed no translation. The young girl watched him carefully. Her hands shook as she tried to understand whether this strange human standing before her was a friend or another enemy sent to capture her. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. Then the girl slowly reached into a small device hanging around her neck. The device blinked several times before producing a clear human voice. She looked directly into Ethan's eyes, tears rolling down her cheeks as she spoke the words that would change everything. "Please, human, help me." Her voice trembled with fear. She struggled to breathe before continuing. "My mother is trapped inside the Sky Hunter's nest." Ethan froze. He had never imagined meeting an alien, and now one was begging him for help. He had no idea what a Sky Hunter was or where this mysterious nest existed, yet the fear in the girl's eyes was real. She was not lying. Whatever had attacked her was still out there. Before Ethan could ask another question, the girl suddenly looked toward the sky. Her face turned completely pale. Every part of her body began shaking uncontrollably. She whispered only 3 terrified words. "They found me." A powerful shadow passed silently over the forest. The moon disappeared behind enormous wings stretching across the sky. The trees bent under a sudden blast of wind, and strange screeching cries echoed through the mountains. Ethan slowly looked upward. High above the clouds, 2 enormous glowing red eyes stared directly at the crash site. Without saying another word, Ethan grabbed the frightened girl and pulled her behind a large fallen tree. Both of them remained completely silent as the giant creatures circled above the forest. Neither of them knew that this was only the beginning of a hunt that would soon place the fate of two worlds into the hands of one ordinary human. Ethan stayed perfectly still behind the fallen tree, holding the frightened alien girl close so she would not panic. Above them, the giant shadow moved slowly across the night sky. Every beat of its massive wings sent cold wind through the forest. The creature did not roar like a wild animal. Instead, it made a low clicking sound that echoed between the trees. It sounded almost as if it was searching, listening, waiting for even the smallest movement. The girl covered her mouth with both hands to stop herself from crying. Her glowing blue eyes never left the dark sky. Ethan could feel her body shaking with fear. He had faced storms, wild animals, and dangerous mountain climbs before, but he had never seen someone this terrified. Whatever was flying above them was far worse than any predator on Earth. Ethan whispered softly, telling her to stay calm and trust him. She nodded, though fear still filled every part of her face. The giant creature circled the crash site several times before slowly landing somewhere beyond the thick trees. Heavy footsteps shook the ground. Each step sounded like a huge rock hitting the earth. Ethan carefully peeked around the tree and caught only a quick glimpse of the creature. Its body was larger than a passenger airplane, covered in black armored feathers that reflected the moonlight. Long, sharp claws dug into the ground, and its glowing red eyes searched every broken branch around the crashed escape pod. For several long minutes, neither Ethan nor the girl dared to breathe loudly. The creature inspected the escape pod carefully. It lowered its long neck and sniffed the air before letting out another strange clicking sound. A second click answered from somewhere high above the clouds. Ethan's heart raced. There was not just one sky hunter. There were more. Many more. When the creature finally spread its giant wings and flew away, the forest became quiet again. Ethan waited another 5 minutes before standing up. He knew rushing now would be a mistake. He looked toward the girl, who was still watching the sky, as if expecting another attack at any second. Only after she was certain the monster had left, did she slowly lower her head. "My name is Lyra," she said through the translator around her neck. Her voice was still weak, but it sounded calmer than before. "Thank you for saving me." "Ethan," he replied with a small smile. "Now tell me the truth. What are those things?" Lyra looked down at the ground. For several seconds she could not speak. Finally she gathered enough courage to answer. "They are called the Sky Hunters. They are not machines. They are living creatures older than many civilizations. They hunt anything that enters their skies." Ethan listened carefully while helping her walk away from the crash site. Every few steps he looked back to make sure nothing was following them. Lyra explained that the Sky Hunters lived on giant floating mountains hidden above the clouds. Those mountains could not be seen from Earth because they remained covered by powerful energy storms. Anyone who flew too close simply disappeared without leaving a trace. As they walked deeper into the forest, Lyra told Ethan about her home. Her people were peaceful explorers who traveled between stars, helping young civilizations. During one mission, her family accidentally entered the hunting territory of the Sky Hunters. Their ship was attacked without warning. Her father sacrificed himself so Lyra and her mother could escape, but the escape failed. The Sky Hunters captured her mother alive and destroyed their ship. Tears slowly rolled down Lyra's face as she remembered that terrible day. "They do not always kill," she whispered. "Sometimes they keep prisoners." Ethan frowned. "Why would they keep prisoners?" "No one knows," Lyra answered. "Every rescue team that tried to enter the nest never returned. The Galactic Alliance declared the mission impossible. They abandoned my mother because they believed no one could survive inside the Sky Hunter's nest." Those words made Ethan stop walking. He had never traveled beyond Earth, yet hearing that an entire alliance had given up on saving one innocent person made him uncomfortable. He looked at Lyra, who seemed far younger than someone carrying so much pain. She had crossed the stars searching for help because everyone else had refused. Suddenly, Ethan noticed fresh claw marks on several nearby trees. They were far too large to belong to any animal on Earth. Some branches had been broken only minutes earlier. His instincts told him the danger was not over. He quickly led Lyra toward an old mining tunnel hidden inside the mountain. The abandoned tunnel had been closed for years after the mine collapsed, but Ethan knew a small side entrance that few people remembered. Inside the tunnel was dark and cold, yet it offered protection. Ethan lit a small camping lantern while Lyra sat against the rocky wall, trying to rest. The silence lasted only a few moments before a deep screech echoed from outside. This time it was much closer than before. Dust fell from the tunnel ceiling as something enormous landed above them. Then another screech answered from the opposite side of the mountain. Lyra's eyes grew wide with horror. "They know we're hiding," she whispered. Outside the tunnel, heavy footsteps slowly began moving toward the hidden entrance. The loud screeches echoed across the valley as 3 giant sky hunters circled above Ethan's cabin. Their enormous wings covered the moon, turning the bright night into complete darkness. Ethan quickly pulled the curtains closed and turned off every light inside the house. He knew the creatures had sharp eyes, and even the smallest light could reveal their location. Lyra stood beside the window, her hands shaking as she watched the dark shadows moving across the sky. She had escaped them once, but she knew they would never stop hunting until they captured her again. Ethan remained calm despite the danger outside. He quietly walked into his storage room and opened an old wooden cabinet filled with climbing gear, camping tools, ropes, and survival equipment. While placing everything inside a large backpack, he carefully thought about their next move. Staying inside the cabin was no longer safe because the sky hunters already knew this area. If they waited until morning, the creatures would surround the entire forest. The only chance to survive was to leave before sunrise and reach the mountains first. Lyra slowly placed her glowing crystal on the wooden table. The blue light filled the room again, creating a floating map above its surface. Ethan looked closely at the giant mountain where the sky hunter's nest rested. The mountain floated high above the clouds, surrounded by endless storms and powerful winds. No normal aircraft could fly through those storms. The map also showed hundreds of flying sky hunters guarding the skies around the nest. It looked impossible to reach, and Ethan finally understood why every rescue mission had failed. As Ethan studied the map more carefully, something unusual caught his attention. Beneath the floating mountain, a narrow blue line appeared for only a few seconds before disappearing again. He quickly asked Lyra to activate the map once more. This time she touched a small glowing symbol hidden in one corner of the crystal. The map changed completely. A secret underground route slowly appeared beneath the mountains, leading through forgotten caves before reaching the bottom of the floating island. It was not a flight path. It was an ancient climbing route that very few people knew existed. Lyra took a deep breath before explaining the hidden route. Many years earlier, her father had discovered the tunnel while exploring unknown planets. He believed the path had been built by an ancient civilization long before the sky hunters arrived. The tunnels reached the heart of the mountain from below, completely hidden from the creatures flying above. Her father planned to use the route if his family was ever trapped, but the attack happened too quickly. He sacrificed himself so Lyra could escape with the crystal map containing the secret entrance. Ethan remained silent for a moment after hearing her story. He looked at the glowing map and then at Lyra's tired face. The entire galaxy had given up because everyone believed entering the sky hunter's nest was impossible. But now, they had something nobody else possessed. They had the hidden path. It was still dangerous, but for the first time, Ethan believed the mission had a real chance. He closed the map and promised Lyra that they would reach the floating mountain together, no matter how difficult the journey became. Before leaving, Ethan remembered something his grandfather had once told him as a child. Behind the cabin stood a small wooden shed that had not been opened for many years. Inside were dozens of old notebooks filled with mountain sketches and hand-drawn maps. Ethan searched through the dusty pages until he found one marked with a strange symbol that looked exactly like the symbol on Lyra's crystal. His heartbeat became faster as he realized his grandfather had seen the floating mountain decades before anyone else. The old notebook contained only a few short notes, but every word seemed important. It described strange lights appearing above the mountains during stormy nights. It also mentioned hearing giant wings flying through the clouds and seeing a mountain that floated in the sky before disappearing again. On the final page, His grandfather had written one warning in large letters. He had written that if the floating mountain ever appeared again, nobody should climb it alone because something ancient was waiting at the top. Lyra looked surprised after reading the notebook. She explained that the strange symbol belonged to an ancient race called the Sky Builders. According to old legends, they had created floating mountains long before modern civilizations existed. Nobody knew where they had gone, but many believed they disappeared after a terrible war against giant flying creatures. Ethan suddenly realized the Sky Hunters had not built the floating nest themselves. They had stolen it from another civilization that had vanished thousands of years ago. As the first light of sunrise slowly reached the valley, Ethan finished preparing everything they needed for the journey. He packed food, water, medical supplies, climbing ropes, flashlights, batteries, and his homemade drone. Although the drone looked old compared to alien technology, Ethan trusted it because he had repaired it himself many times. He smiled at Lyra and joked that humans often survived using simple tools instead of expensive machines. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Lyra laughed quietly and the fear in her eyes became a little smaller. Their peaceful moment lasted only a few seconds. Ethan's drone suddenly switched on without anyone touching it. The screen filled with heavy static before showing a live image from the roof of the cabin. Both of them stared in silence as 4 enormous shadows slowly landed around the house. The Sky Hunters had surrounded every possible escape route, and their glowing red eyes searched the ground below. Ethan quietly picked up his backpack while Lyra held the crystal tightly in her hands. Without saying a single word, both of them slipped through a hidden trapdoor beneath the cabin floor, knowing that one wrong step could end their mission before it had truly begun. Ethan quietly closed the hidden trapdoor beneath the cabin, while the heavy footsteps of the Sky Hunters echoed above them. The underground passage was dark, narrow, and filled with the smell of old earth. Only the weak light from Lyra's crystal showed the rocky path ahead. Neither of them spoke because every sound seemed to travel through the tunnel. Above their heads, the giant creatures searched the cabin, tearing apart the roof and smashing the walls. Ethan knew that if the Sky Hunters discovered the secret tunnel, their journey would end before it truly began. The hidden passage stretched deep beneath the forest, twisting through ancient stone walls that looked far older than any human construction. Strange symbols covered the rocks on both sides, glowing softly whenever Lyra's crystal came close. Ethan gently touched one of the carvings with his hand. The stone felt warm even though the cave was cold. Lyra explained that these markings belonged to the Sky Builders, an ancient civilization that had once ruled the floating mountains. According to old legends, they built these tunnels as emergency escape routes during a terrible war thousands of years ago. After walking for nearly 2 hours, the tunnel suddenly opened into an enormous underground chamber. Ethan stopped in complete surprise. Giant stone pillars reached high toward the ceiling, while a peaceful river flowed quietly through the middle of the cave. Bright blue crystals grew naturally from the walls, filling the entire chamber with beautiful glowing light. It looked less like a cave and more like a forgotten underground city. Even Lyra stood silently for several moments because she had never seen this place with her own eyes before. As they carefully explored the chamber, Ethan noticed something unusual lying beneath a thick layer of dust. It was an old helmet made from silver-colored metal, unlike anything on Earth. Nearby rested broken weapons, damaged armor, and pieces of machines that had completely rusted away with time. Some of the skeletons scattered across the ground were human, while others belonged to alien races Ethan had never imagined could exist. The discovery shocked him because it proved that humans had somehow reached this place long before modern history had recorded anything about aliens. Lyra slowly picked up a small metal badge lying beside one of the skeletons. She gently cleaned away the dust before showing it to Ethan. The strange writing on the badge was instantly translated by her crystal device. It belonged to a rescue team that had disappeared nearly 60 years earlier, while searching for missing explorers. The team had been declared lost forever, and nobody had ever learned what happened to them. Ethan looked around the chamber once more, and realized this underground city had silently guarded their secrets for decades. The deeper they walked into the forgotten ruins, the stranger everything became. Large stone statues stood along both sides of the tunnel, each showing winged creatures fighting giant birds with glowing red eyes. Some statues were damaged, while others had almost completely collapsed. Lyra carefully studied the ancient artwork before quietly explaining that these were not decorations. They recorded the final battle between the Sky Builders and the first Sky Hunters. According to ancient history, the Sky Builders lost the war, and the floating mountains became the hunting grounds of the giant creatures forever. As they continued forward, the tunnel suddenly became much narrower. The glowing crystals slowly disappeared, leaving only darkness around them. Ethan switched on his flashlight while carefully leading the way. The silence inside the tunnel felt unnatural. Even the sound of flowing water had vanished. Every step echoed loudly against the stone walls. Ethan's instincts warned him that something was wrong. He quietly signaled Lyra to stay close while he carefully examined the path ahead. Without warning, the ground beneath Ethan's feet suddenly cracked. Large pieces of stone broke away and fell into a deep underground pit hidden below the tunnel floor. Ethan quickly jumped backward just in time, grabbing Lyra's arm before she also slipped into the darkness. Both of them fell onto the rocky ground, breathing heavily as loose stones continued falling into the bottomless hole. When Ethan shined his flashlight downward, the light disappeared long before reaching the bottom. The ancient bridge had almost completely collapsed with age. Finding another route seemed impossible, until Lyra noticed several glowing symbols carved into the nearby wall. She carefully placed her crystal against the largest symbol, and the entire tunnel began shaking. Massive stone blocks slowly moved aside with a deep grinding sound. A narrow bridge hidden inside the walls for thousands of years slowly extended across the pit. Ethan smiled with relief. The ancient builders had prepared hidden pathways for anyone who understood their technology. Without Lyra's crystal, nobody could have crossed this dangerous trap. Hours later, the tunnel finally reached a steep climb leading toward the surface. As Ethan carefully climbed the rocky path, he noticed fresh claw marks covering the walls. Unlike the ancient ruins below, these marks looked new. Some rocks had been broken only days earlier. Lyra quietly touched the sharp scratches and immediately recognized them. The Sky Hunters sometimes entered these lower caves while searching for trapped prey. That meant the creatures knew about at least part of the hidden tunnel system. Their secret route was no longer as safe as they had believed. When they finally reached the top of the narrow passage, Ethan slowly pushed aside a large stone blocking the exit. Fresh mountain air rushed into the cave as bright sunlight filled the darkness. Standing before them was the tallest mountain Ethan had ever seen. High above its snowy peak, hidden among thick white clouds, floated an enormous shadow. At first it looked like another mountain, but as the clouds slowly moved away, Ethan could clearly see giant nests covering its surface. Hundreds of enormous sky hunters circled through the sky like silent guardians protecting their kingdom. Ethan and Lyra stood quietly behind the rocks, staring at the impossible sight before them. The floating mountain was real, and somewhere inside that enormous nest, Lyra's mother was still waiting to be rescued. Neither of them noticed the fresh footprints in the snow nearby. Someone else had reached the mountain before them, and whoever it was had disappeared only a few minutes earlier, leaving behind a trail that led directly toward the secret entrance beneath the Sky Hunter's nest. Ethan carefully examined the fresh footprints in the snow while Lyra stood nearby, watching the sky for any sign of the Sky Hunters. The footprints were much larger than Lyra's and clearly belonged to a human wearing heavy climbing boots. The snow around them was still soft, proving that whoever had walked there had passed only a short time earlier. Ethan felt both surprised and confused. He had believed no human had ever reached this forgotten mountain, yet someone had arrived before them and disappeared without leaving a single clue behind. The footprints climbed toward a narrow path hidden between two giant cliffs. Ethan and Lyra followed them carefully, making sure not to leave obvious tracks of their own. The path became steeper with every step, forcing them to climb over frozen rocks and thick layers of ice. Cold wind roared through the mountains, making it difficult to hear anything around them. Above the clouds, enormous sky hunters continued circling the floating mountain, but none of them seemed to notice the tiny figures climbing below. After nearly an hour of climbing, the footprints suddenly stopped beside a huge stone wall. Ethan searched the area, expecting to find another trail, but there was nothing except smooth rock covered with ancient carvings. It looked as though the mysterious traveler had simply vanished into thin air. Lyra stepped closer and recognized one of the glowing symbols carved into the stone. She carefully placed her crystal against the center of the symbol, and within seconds, the entire wall began to shake with a deep rumbling sound. A hidden doorway slowly opened, revealing a dark tunnel that led deep inside the mountain. Cool air rushed out from the ancient passage, carrying a strange smell that neither Ethan nor Lyra had noticed before. The walls inside the tunnel were smooth and perfectly shaped, unlike the natural caves they had crossed earlier. Blue lights hidden inside the stone slowly turned on one after another, as if the mountain itself had awakened after centuries of silence. Ethan realized that someone had entered this tunnel not long ago because the dust on the floor had already been disturbed. As they walked deeper into the secret passage, they discovered signs that another explorer had indeed passed through. Empty food packages, broken climbing rope, and a damaged flashlight lay scattered across the floor. Ethan picked up the flashlight and noticed it was made with modern human technology. Whoever had entered this place was not an ancient traveler, but someone from Earth. That discovery raised even more questions. Why had another human come here, and what had happened to them inside the mountain? The tunnel finally opened into a massive underground hall unlike anything Ethan had ever imagined. Huge crystal pillars reached from the floor to the ceiling, glowing with soft blue light that reflected across polished stone walls. Ancient machines rested silently around the chamber, their strange designs untouched by time. At the center stood an enormous circular platform covered with symbols that matched the ones on Lyra's crystal. The room felt peaceful, but Ethan could not ignore the feeling that invisible eyes were watching them from somewhere beyond the darkness. Lyra carefully examined the ancient platform before explaining that this was once a transport station, built by the Sky Builders. Long ago, it had carried people directly into the floating city above the clouds. Most of the machines no longer worked, but one part of the system still held a small amount of energy. She gently placed her crystal into a circular slot at the center of the platform. Moments later, glowing lines spread across the floor, and the entire chamber filled with a deep humming sound. Suddenly, a bright beam of light appeared in front of them. It formed the image of an elderly alien wearing shining armor. Although transparent like a ghost, the figure looked completely real. Ethan instinctively stepped back, but the mysterious figure simply smiled. The ancient guardian introduced himself as the final protector of the Sky Builders. He explained that the floating mountain had once been a peaceful city, where many races lived together before the Sky Hunters invaded and turned it into their hunting nest. The guardian's expression became serious as he continued speaking. He warned Ethan that the Queen Sky Hunter was unlike the ordinary creatures flying outside. She was older, larger, and far more intelligent than the others. She could sense fear, predict movements, and command every Sky Hunter across the floating mountains. Many brave warriors had entered the nest believing they could defeat her, but none had ever returned. The guardian looked directly at Ethan and quietly admitted that rescuing Lyra's mother would be far more dangerous than simply reaching the mountain. Before disappearing, the guardian activated one final machine hidden beneath the platform. A secret doorway slowly opened, revealing a narrow stone bridge leading upward toward the floating island itself. The bridge disappeared into thick clouds, making it impossible to see where it ended. The guardian explained that this was the last hidden entrance into the Sky Hunter's nest. Once they crossed it, there would be no safe path back. Ethan looked at Lyra, and without speaking, both of them understood that turning back was no longer an option. They stepped onto the ancient bridge together, moving carefully through the cold clouds that surrounded the floating mountain. Every step brought them closer to the enemy's home. After several minutes, the clouds finally cleared, revealing an enormous nest built from giant trees, broken alien ships, and strange black stone. Hundreds of massive eggs rested between twisted branches, while countless Sky Hunters slept around them. The entire nest stretched farther than Ethan could see, covering nearly the whole floating island. Ethan and Lyra quietly hid behind a fallen piece of ancient stone near the edge of the nest. In the distance, they spotted rows of metal cages hanging beneath enormous branches. Some cages were empty, while others held frightened prisoners from many different alien worlds. Ethan searched each cage carefully until Lyra suddenly grabbed his arm. Tears filled her eyes as she pointed toward one of the highest cages. Inside, weak but still alive, sat her mother. Before either of them could celebrate finding her, a deep shadow slowly covered the ground behind them. Someone enormous had silently landed only a few steps away, and the slow sound of heavy breathing filled the cold mountain air.